LSU football's Brian Polian has decided to leave the program. Where is he headed? Why is he leaving? And where does that leave LSU football?
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast, but do not forget, you can also watch the podcast on YouTube. So, of course, you can find us on your preferred podcast platform, but remember, we are free and uploaded every single day on YouTube as well. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every single day. You can follow me on Twitter at CarolineFenton1. You can follow along with the podcast at Locked On LSU. Just appreciate y'all for being here, for always making us your first listen every single day. So some news that I did not expect to hear today. It was not on my bingo card for the day. When I saw the news, my eyebrow raised. I thought, what? Wait, what? Really? Are you sure? I had to double check and make sure, those accounts that are like fake Sports Center accounts or, fake whatever accounts. I had to double check and make sure, no, this is a reliable source. This is what is happening. Brian Polian has decided to leave the LSU football program. Brian Polian has decided to take the athletic director job at John Carroll. Now, Brian Polian went to John Carroll. It's a small school in Ohio. I believe it's right outside of out of Cleveland. That's where he went to school. That's where he played college football. He played linebacker for John Carroll before starting his career as a GA at Michigan State, and then worked his way up through the ranks. And now the rest is history. Brian Polian took to Twitter and said, I'm going back home to my alma mater, John Carroll University, and taking on a new challenge as the athletic director. While it was a very difficult decision, it was clear to Laura, his wife, and me that it was the right choice for our family, where our children are in their lives. We are excited to set down roots and serve at a place that we love. He goes on to thank LSU football. He goes on to thank Scott Woodward, several people within the organization, says thank you to Brian Kelly. Basically explains why he is deciding to make this move. And it doesn't sound, to me at least, like it's any bad blood between Brian Kelly and Brian Polian, or Brian Polian and the LSU football program or the LSU athletic department. It just sounds like what's best for Brian Polian. And look, I get it. I totally get it in multiple different ways for multiple different reasons. That's where, obviously just based off of this statement, it sounds like Brian Polian loves John Carroll and wants to give back to John Carroll. I get it. If I ever had the opportunity to work for LSU in a similar capacity, I would take it in a heartbeat. It's a place that I love. It's a place that I have considered home. I've lived in several different places, but no place has felt at home quite like South Louisiana has. I get that. I understand. You want to give back to the place that got you to where you are. Totally understand that. I totally understand Brian Polian wanting to pursue this opportunity and kind of do his own thing. This is his opportunity to be a leader in the greatest capacity that he's had the opportunity in his entire career. Looking at his career and the several different stops that he's made, he's never been able to serve as a head coach. I don't know if that's a goal of his or not, but he's always been a coach or a role player within a head coach's vision. He was a person underneath a larger umbrella. And that's no disrespect to Brian Polian or any coordinator or any positional coach. It's just simply what it is. When you have the opportunity to run the show in a capacity like being an athletic director, that's a wonderful opportunity, especially at your alma mater when it's a place that you love. I totally understand it. Brian Polian, when he was taken away from his special teams duties and when he moved from special teams coordinator to kind of the general manager position that he's in now, that was a move that needed to be made. At 100%, absolutely. I've complained enough about special teams on here that you'll probably know That when I say it, I mean it, that was a move that needed to be made. But Brian Polian made it. And I'm going to slip up and call him Brian Kelly at some point. Excuse me, force of habit. Brian Polian said, yeah, like I want to be out there in an on the field role. I want to be out there working with the guys on the field, out at practice every day, getting to know the players on a more personal level, getting to work with them, getting to, do the X's and O's. And he didn't have that opportunity anymore. I mean, he would be the first one to tell you that the special teams unit this past season did not go according to plan. Within the slightest, because if the plan was to be better than one of the worst special teams units in college football, which I have to assume the plan probably was, then things did not go according to plan. I think that Brian Polian moved into a role that fit his strengths perfectly. He was working as the special teams coordinator and also had a heavy hand in recruiting and some of the off the field things as well. And that's what he really shined at. That's what he was really good at. So that role fit him. While we all wanted to see a change at special teams coordinator, having Brian Polian as part of the organization as a whole, not in a special teams capacity. No, not special teams, but in some sort of capacity, I think was good for the program, and it fit Brian Polian's strengths very well. I think there's a reason why Brian Kelly could have brought any coach or coordinator from Notre Dame or none at all, but he decided to bring one, and it was Brian Polian. And Brian Kelly, in his first season as LSU, proved to me that I can trust him, and he kind of demanded the respect and the trust from both myself and probably you and this entire fan base. So now I'm kind of operating it like, look, man, you showed me what you could do in year one. No, you're going to have to continue to prove it to me, but you showed me that I can trust you, that I can trust you finding the right coaches and putting them in the right places. So I trusted that Brian Kelly's move to put Brian Polian in the capacity that he did put him in, because I think that he was good at it. So now that leaves LSU in kind of a difficult position. I wish Brian Polian nothing but the best. A little bit of stability in he and his family's lives after, his career has taken him from the furthest east point in the country to the furthest west point in the country and then all the way across the middle. A little bit of stability in a place that they love. I'm sure they appreciate. I'm happy for Brian Polian. I wish him nothing but the best. But that does leave LSU in a little bit of a vulnerable position. While LSU is not forced to replace an on-the-field role, John Jancic has filled in Brian Polian's role as special teams coordinator. Brian Polian was still serving as the director of recruiting. And that's a really important role. One, because it's freaking recruiting. And we all know how important recruiting is, especially in this league, especially at this school that places so much importance on in-state recruiting. But also given several NCAA regulations and rules, as I'm having some webcam difficulties, regulations and rules from the NCAA. Sorry about that. If you're watching on YouTube, I had to switch out my webcam. Rules and regulations within the NCAA that you have a designated recruiter that can do certain things that other recruiters cannot. And Brian Polian was serving in that role that he really kind of had carte blanche with recruiting. And that's something that LSU was going to have to kind of find a person to fill in that role. As we all know, recruiting is important 24/7. As we all know, we're in a transfer portal window, and that recruiting is just as important as recruiting kids out of high school, getting that role in place to organize official visits to games throughout the season, to continue finding those guys that they want to bring in and guys that they want to get to know and guys that they are really targeting. That's what's important to me. So where does it leave LSU from a recruiting standpoint? And then, of course, all of Brian Polian's other administrative duties. He played a big role in NIL, not just going out and, getting the boots on the ground and finding NIL deals, but making sure that they were NCAA compliant, making sure that the NIL deals were going according to plan. and whatever other administrative duties he was doing, whatever falls into that general manager umbrella, whether it's, managing and overseeing transfers, making sure that their transcripts are taken care of, making sure that the classes that they sign up for, whatever those roles, whatever umbrella that falls under, that's now going to have to go to somebody else. That's not a role that Brian Kelly, I think, can just absorb in its entirety and can move forward without a hitch. So Brian Polian, I'm happy for him. Congratulations to Brian Polian, who will now be the athletic director at John Carroll at his alma mater. But now LSU finds itself in a position to have to fill a position that was really kind of tailor-made for Brian Polian. And I don't know how easy that's going to be able to do. Coming up next, it is transfer portal season as I talk about recruiting. Talked about some offensive players that LSU could target in the transfer portal. Now looking at the defensive side of the ball. At positions of need, what are some players or, who are some players that LSU could target at positions of need defensively in the transfer portal? We will get into that coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That is $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. What I love about FanDuel is it's incredibly safe and secure. So you have your bank account information uploaded on this app, and I know that sometimes that can make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. You're really worried about, giving this very vulnerable and important information to an app, but don't worry about it. With FanDuel, all of your information is safe. All of your information is, secured and under the app and you. So you do not need to worry about that. With FanDuel, there are several different wagers that you can place as we get down through the nitty-gritty of the NBA playoffs. I'm taking Steph Curry every single time. I know the Warriors are taking on the Lakers in the second round of the playoffs, but you know what? Give me Steph. I mean, he has proven to me that he is just as clutch as ever, and I will pay if I bet against him. But there's no better place to bet all the NBA action than America's #1 sportsbook. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Well, thanks again for making Locked on LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on tomorrow's episode, remember, we'll have a Mailbag Wednesday. So get those questions in. You can send them on Twitter or you can comment them below on the YouTube page. Plus, I'll also do a breakdown on BJ Ojolari with the host of Locked on Cardinals, what the Arizona Cardinals are getting in their second round pick, and BJ Ojolari. That'll be on tomorrow's podcast. But now I want to get into some defensive players that LSU can target at positions of need specifically. Now, we can continue to break down the transfer portal. Players maybe not necessarily out of position of need, but just really great talent. We'll continue to do that over the next couple of days. We've got plenty of time and plenty of transfer portal players that we can break down. But as we talk about positions of need defensively, no position comes to mind more than the safety position. Just given the injuries of some of the players at that position, of the veterans within the room, of course, we know Major Burns was out for the remainder of spring with an injury. I can expect probably Major Burns to be back for fall camp. I don't know that for certain. I don't know the severity of Major Burns' injury. It was bad enough to keep him out of spring ball, which was okay. Again, Major Burns does not need spring reps. But if Major Burns is not able to come back for fall camp and he maybe isn't 100%, then you're going to need some insurance pieces. Same thing with Greg Brooks. He's got that nagging ankle injury. And you can't leave it all to Javian Toviano and the rest of the young guys in this defensive back room to carry the load if some of your veterans go down. The DBs as a whole, I think you can always use more depth. You can always use some role players that you can count on. But more specifically, I'm looking at some of the safeties, and there are two in particular that I am highlighting. The first one, it may be out of the realm of possibility, but entertain me for a second. Jalen Key is the first one that I am starring, I am circling, I am highlighting. If LSU can land this player, I think they'd be in good shape. Jalen Key is a safety out of UAB. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of high school out of Florida. and really didn't have a whole lot of offers coming out of high school, committed to UAB. He's played there over the last several years, but really broke out this past season. In 2022, he registered 60 tackles, 4.5 of those were for loss, had a sack and 3 interceptions. Of course, we know LSU played UAB this past season. You can go back, watch the tape of Jalen Key. Wasn't his best game against LSU. Of course, much higher level of competition going up against LSU than really any other team on UAB's schedule, but really, really popped off against an AAC competition this past season. And he is the top rated, not one of the top rated safety in the transfer portal this season that has yet to commit to their next school of the future. Jalen Key has already taken visits to Alabama. I believe he's at Ole Miss now. If not, he's just wrapped up his visit to Ole Miss and has Florida State, Ohio State, and Oregon coming up. Now, those will be all of his visits. So Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida State, Ohio State, Oregon. I say it's a long shot because if LSU is not on that list, I don't know if it's even in the realm of possibility. I don't know if it's LSU's lack of interest in him, his lack of interest in LSU, or just more interest other places. So it's seeming like it's a bit of a long shot, but it's still a name that I want to throw out there as the highest rated player at probably the number 1 position, if not number 2 position of need behind the offensive line for LSU. The second one that I've been looking at that still, like, I don't feel great about, honestly, but it's another safety, and that's Travis Jay out of Florida State. Now, really highly touted player coming out of high school. He was a top 20 defensive back coming out of high school. I had offers from all across the SEC, from Alabama, from Georgia, from Tennessee, but just never really came to fruition at Florida State. And I don't know why that is. He's been at Florida State for the last 3 seasons. I don't know if it was a coaching change from Jimbo Fisher to Mike Norvell. That was the 2018 season. So he would have come in just a couple years after. But in 2020, he played in 6 games, started in 2, had 26 tackles and interception. 2021, I saw more action, played in 10 games, had 1 start, 17 tackles and 2 interceptions, and did serve on special teams as a kick returner. But in 2022, didn't even see the field. He was defensive scout team for almost the entirety of the 2022 season. I think I only saw work in 2 games in 2022. So you see, he played more games in 2021 than he did in 2020, but you saw the production go down just a little bit. I don't know the reason for that. That's something that LSU's recruiting team and scout team is going to have to do behind the scenes. So that's why, it's not a guy that I would say, oh my gosh, LSU needs this guy, just because the production has only decreased and pretty dramatically over time. Is it a problem with culture? Is it a problem with fit? Is it a problem with the defensive scheme just isn't working? I don't know the answer to that question. But neither of these guys really stand out to me to being a slam dunk for LSU. Now, these guys are true safeties. There's several other corners in the transfer portal that could play corner, could play safety, could be a little bit more of a versatile defensive back. And we'll continue to keep you updated with any players that LSU has been targeting. They might be a little bit more of a corner, just adding DBs into the DB room, and then they can start to, move guys around from there, play the nickel, play safety, so on and so forth. But neither of these guys really stood out to me as being sure things, as being guys that's like, yes, that's going to be a great fit for LSU. But 2 guys that I pointed out because they are the 2 highest rated safeties in the transfer portal now that have not found their next landing spot. I think another interesting thing to follow that we'll continue to get to throughout the next couple of days as the transfer portal starts to transpire, how many defensive linemen from South Carolina want to come to LSU. Now, to my knowledge, there's only 1 defensive lineman from South Carolina that has entered the transfer portal. We'll continue to get to that throughout the rest of the week. But coming up next, started the show on kind of an unexpected story, ending the show on a pretty bizarre story, and we'll discuss, and we'll do that coming up next. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. So this was a very odd story that I saw last night that, to be completely honest with you, I was not expecting to see in the slightest. And really, I'm still confused about it. So let's talk about this together. This is an article coming out from ESPN that says Ohio halts betting on Alabama baseball after suspicious activity. So basically, the gist of the article, the gist of the story is the state of Ohio has banned any wagering on Alabama baseball. Kind of strange there. And it may be Alabama as a whole, but I believe it's just Alabama baseball. Like if you wanted to place a future on Alabama football, I think you could do that in Ohio still. But there was some quote unquote suspicious activity that had been reported, and the NCAA is going to continue to investigate that. But it's very minimal information that has been provided in this ESPN article. It just says that the Ohio Casino Control Commission executive director said that the acceptance of any wagers on University of Alabama baseball is prohibited effective immediately because of suspicious wagering activity in the Alabama LSU series. So that's why this is relevant to LSU, because this is suspicious betting activity that came forward during the Alabama LSU series. And there are a couple things that I think are odd and I have questions about. It was suspicious activity in the Alabama LSU series. However, it's only banning Alabama baseball wagers. It says nothing about banning LSU baseball wagers. So was it money placed on Alabama? And it's in Ohio, keep in mind. It's not in the state of Alabama. Like, it'd be one thing if there were some crazy $1 million bets coming in from Tuscaloosa for Alabama baseball. That's one thing. But Ohio? And what's the suspicious activity? Was it, a very large sum of money that was bet on Alabama baseball? Was it several wagers that were coming in around the same time on Alabama baseball? Like, what was suspicious about it? Surely it couldn't have just been one bet that was placed on Alabama baseball, within Ohio state lines, and all of a sudden they're shutting down betting on Alabama baseball. And also, if it was so suspicious, don't you think that there would be maybe a halt on Ohio betting, period? Like, why is this something that has been a repetitive thing, a repetitive cycle that's just been Alabama baseball? And then how does this affect LSU, if at all? From what we've seen, it's just Alabama baseball, and the NCAA will be investigating it. But is that something that the NCAA is going to be investigating behind Alabama's closed doors? Like, is this now going to be a University of Alabama problem? Is this the University of Alabama's athletic director's problem? Is there going to be an investigation into LSU baseball? Like, I have so many questions about this story. However, the information that's provided in this ESPN article is very, very limited. But there has been, some kind of grumblings coming out of Louisiana. So the Louisiana Gaming Control Board told NOLA.com that there were bets specifically made in Cincinnati that had suspicious activity. So, I mean, apparently it was a large bet. But how large does it have to be in order for it to flag something from, like, the entire state of Ohio, in order for there to be an NCAA investigation? Maybe it was just one really dumb, rich person that bet on Alabama baseball. I don't know. And I don't think, just based off the information that I have, which obviously is incredibly limited, I don't think that this has anything to do with LSU. I'm honestly kind of surprised that it has anything to do with Alabama either. Unless it's, the family member of an Alabama baseball coach who lives in Ohio. I don't know. I have no idea. But where it stands right now, LSU is not involved. LSU's athletic department is not involved. But as things progress, as we start to get a little bit more information, of course, I will keep you updated. But for now, it's business as usual. Just interesting to see a story like this tied to an LSU baseball series. And also, how many times has a college baseball series? You'll know I love college baseball. I absolutely adore it. But how many times has a college baseball series stopped the sports books in their tracks? I mean, not a Super Bowl bet, not a whatever else kind of bet that might be on a game that's a little bit bigger. I don't know. In Ohio, How many Ohioans care about Alabama baseball? It's crazy to me. It's a wild story, but of course, I will keep y'all updated. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. My everydayers tomorrow on the show, my full BJ Ojulari breakdown, what the Arizona Cardinals are getting in BJ Ojulari, and of course, a mailbag Wednesday. So make sure to not forget to get those questions in. Send them on Twitter at Caroline Fenton 1 or at Locked On LSU, or feel free to comment below. All of that coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.